So there are going to be certain cases where whenever we are requesting user input, it may be important to check that that input meets some requirements. So rather than allowing the program to continue, we're going to repeat that input routine, so that request for user input, if the user provides some faulty values, which is to say values that do not meet whatever requirements we've set for those inputs. So the way that we're going to structure this, we will essentially have a while loop, and the condition is going to be that while the input that the user is giving us is not what we were expecting or what we required, we're going to continue to print out that request to the user and then wait to go ahead and get their input. But in addition to this, we also need to make sure that we've gotten that first attempt at the input. So just before we enter the loop, or while loop in this case, we want to go ahead and give them what is known as a priming read. So this first input value to check, which is often going to be provided by the user before entering the loop, that's going to be the priming read. So this input validation is going to be useful for both keyboard input using the scanner class, as well as input dialogues from the JOption pane class. So to present you with an example of this using the scanner, we're going to first set up our scanner object. It's going to be reading from the keyboard input, so we'll call the scanner object keyboard. We then are going to set up a variable for the input that we want to get from the user. In this particular case, we're going to be asking them for a positive number, specifically a positive integer. So we're going to create an int variable called positive input, and we're going to initialize it to 0. We'll then go ahead and ask the user to enter a positive number. So we're going to say that this positive input, we're going to assign to it the next integer value that the user enters. We'll then go ahead and say that while our positive input is less than or equal to 0, so in this case we are assuming that 0 is neither negative nor positive, so we specifically need a number that is 1 or greater. So if they give us a value that does not meet the requirements, so this is basically the opposite of what we wanted, which was that the number would be greater than 0. So while the number is less than or equal to 0, we're going to go ahead and print that statement out again, saying please enter a positive number, and then we're going to go ahead and wait again for them to enter some integer value. So let's go ahead and actually put this together and see how it works. So we'll go ahead and minimize this, come over to NetBeans, we'll go ahead and create a new project. So this Java application, we're going to go ahead and make input validation. We'll go ahead and finish that. And right here, go ahead and remove these comments. Make some adjustments to the style. And we'll come back to the main method in a moment. First, we need to make sure that we import the scanner class. We're going to do import java.util.scanner. And then right here, we'll go ahead and create our scanner object. So we're going to say scanner keyboard is equal to a new scanner. And we're going to have it read from our input, so from the keyboard input. We'll then go ahead and create an int variable. So this is going to be our int positive input. This will be equal to 0 initially. We'll then have that first request from the user. There's a system.out.println. Let's do print. Say please enter a positive number. And then next we'll go ahead and take whatever value they give us and store that into our positive input variable. So we're going to say positive input is equal to keyboard.nextInt. Go ahead and save this. And so if we were to run this program right now, so we go ahead and just execute this, we could go ahead and put in a number, say like 10, and then that would be the end of the program. The problem right now is the fact that since we're not doing any input validation, if we run this again, if we put something like -10, it'll still complete successfully, and it will essentially assume that the value that we gave it is perfectly fine. But we need to double check that number to make sure that it actually meets the requirements, which is that it must be a positive number. So we're going to go ahead and create our while loop. We'll go ahead and say while our positive input is less than or equal to 0. So while this is meeting some condition that is the opposite of what we asked for, we're just going to go ahead and print that statement to the console again. We'll say, please enter a positive number. And then we can go ahead and just take our positive input, and we'll assign to that their next int. Go ahead and save that. And so then if we go ahead and run this again, so now if we give it a positive input, a positive number to begin with, go ahead and type in something like 10, then that's going to be the end of the program, so no problems there. But if we give it a negative value or a 0, say like -10, it's going to print out that request again because we didn't give it a valid input. So if we go ahead and do this again, let's say we do something like 10 now, then it will go ahead and actually complete. Alternatively, if we run this, we do something like -10. If we just keep giving it negative values, then it will constantly stay stuck in that loop. Let's do like -8, until eventually we give it something that is going to meet those requirements. So in this case, something that is a positive number. So if we put something like just +1, then it will go ahead and complete. So eventually, I'll go ahead and kind of add on to this by utilizing this input validation with slightly more complex programs where we actually need to do something with that input. So we'll have some little bit of input validation, and then after that we'll do some calculations, and then we'll get some final outputs. For now, I just want to be able to present this much of it so you can at least see the setup for this priming read, and then this while loop right here where we continuously ask the user to give us a value until they give us something that is valid. Okay, so in the next video, we'll go ahead and take a look at the do while loop. So basically see a little bit about what kind of inverts the logic of the while loop. And we'll also take a look not only at just simple examples of this, but also see how we can use the do while loop for input validation as well.